Hey, welcome. We're doing a little something on this day today. It's actually Friday, September the 6th when we're recording this, but we'll make it available for you to watch anytime, because I think what we're going to talk about is pertinent at any time. And with me today is Janet Rees, and she founded the Money Counselor in 2010. And it's an objective financial service that offers family, small business owners, and holistic foundational money management solutions and advice. Janet is a financial consultant with certification in business analysis. She's a registered social service worker and a solution-focused counselor. She's been teaching money management since 2003, and boy, have we ever seen a lot of changes in those times for the region of Durham College, and now in her own business as the Money Counselor. Her vast experience benefits her clients and ranges from being a real estate office manager to a frontline worker, landlord, investor, contractor, and getting people out of the worst financial crisis and helping others to experience joy when it comes to money. These experiences confirmed one thing for sure, that whatever we want to do or be, we can. And as a single mom of 2 teenage girls, Janet's mission is to empower others around their finances so that they too can live from a place of joy and proclaim each day that it's great to be rich. Sweet. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good day, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. Yeah, nice to have you. So, Janet, I prepared some questions for you for this look at money. And, money, it's a big conversation, right? It's the two things we don't ever have enough of is time and money, and maybe love in some cases. But, money, it's really a story, right? And it's based on a story and beliefs. Where do those stories and beliefs come from?
Where do they come from? Well, interesting, because your first sentence was, we never have enough time and money.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating, because that is what most people's story is, right? And so those stories come from primarily 2 places, David. Firstly, it comes from our upbringing. So one of the things that happens in our lives, and this isn't about blame, okay? This is about awareness, right? Is when we're children, our caregivers, or usually our parents, the relationship that they have with money is what is modeled to us, right? And so in those very informative years, when we're a young child, when we're grocery shopping with them, when we go back to school shopping, when we go on vacation, if we do, even the private moments in the home between parents around money, when it's payday, when bills are getting paid, that type of thing, how our parents' relationship with money is communicated to us and imprinted upon us through their own words, actions, behaviors, and emotions. Okay? And so without anybody really knowing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the second place where those stories come from is society. So in society, we look at the media, television, newspapers, radio, YouTube, social media, Facebook, Instagram, all of that stuff. And so all of the messaging from other people who have been imprinted by their parents now is weaved throughout the society in all of those ways.
Yeah, or the collective consciousness, right?
That's right. And so the messaging is solidified right? By what we see, and we're attracted to what we know, right? So depending on where you're at will dictate what you notice out in society, right?
Right. So this, this can lead to some real tough stuff for us, like, because if we, let's say we're on social media and we see somebody, hey, I just closed a big deal, or here I am on my holiday in the Bahamas, wrong place to be right now. But here I am on my holiday, or I'm on my yacht, or something like that. And we look at, our colleagues, friends, associates on social media celebrating and living the life that we only wish we could have. So that leaves us feeling maybe a little less than, maybe a little bit insecure. Maybe it reminds us of where we're at and where we're not at.
Mm-hmm.
So how then, Janet, can we move past that social conditioning, that the media, that social media portrays in everyday life?
Well, I think the first step is really awareness, becoming aware that we are all individuals with our own money story, right?
Right.
And so, as a professional who's worked with a lot of businesses, I've worked with award-winning businesses that have been in business for more than 20 years, the pillar of a community. And yet, from a financial perspective, they may have made more money working at McDonald's, right? And I say that with all due respect, because at the end of the day, it's not about how much money you make, it's how much money you keep, right? And so quite often what happens is people are spending more money than they earn. So yes, they may be experiencing these beautiful experiences, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have no money stress. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have debt, right? And so we make a lot of assumptions, right, around society, what we read and what we see. But we have to become more aware and understand that social media is not there for our education or for our benefit. It's entertainment. And even in a newspaper, seriously, that really is the same, because look at any headlines, and they're usually exaggerated or, very skewed to a political party's viewpoints. So there is a bigger agenda with every single piece of information that's out there. And I think awareness, once we become aware of that, people can start to really focus more on where they need to focus, which is on themselves, right? What they're doing, what they're feeling, how they're wanting to live their life, as opposed to comparing with things that really, you can't really compare apples to oranges, right? And when we compare ourselves to those types of things that we're seeing, that's what we're doing. And you really can't compare it, right? Because you're not seeing the whole picture, basically.
Yeah, it's like the iceberg. You're only seeing the tip of the ice, not what's below.
That's
We started off talking about our money stories and beliefs and where they came from, and then, social conditioning, our parents. And our parents, grew up in a time that was very different than it is now. I mean,
Very
now we have
different.
so much choice, so many things to spend money on. I remember, when
Totally.
my parents bought their first house, it was $17,000. No,
Right?
27,000, right?
Yeah.
And that was a lot. Now it's nothing to spend $1 million on a house. It's like,
Oh,
yeah,
it's so
right?
true. And remember, we didn't have to pay for TV. We had an antenna.
Yeah.
And we didn't pay for water. It came
No.
out of a well.
Yeah,
And
bottled
it was
water.
free, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Cell phones.
mhm.
Look at all the things that have come into existence where we're spending like oodles of money. I mean, cable and internet, and that and my cell phone. I don't know personally, that in and of itself alone Yeah, it's a good couple hundred, $250 a month, right?
Well, we need to reevaluate that then, David.
Yes,
That's far too high.
I know. I know. But that's what it is. It's like 225 or something like that. It's
Mhm,
crazy.
mhm.
So how do those beliefs and stories impact us, and maybe even get in the way of our goals and dreams in terms of our life and our financial situation? How do those stories and beliefs really impact us? The good,
Well,
the
I
bad,
think,
the ugly.
yeah, like I think personally, from my experience, the way that they impact us is profound because the way they impact us is subconscious, right? And I want to give an example that's personal here,
Mhm.
to illustrate for whoever's, for the viewers, right? And because I used to be a person who had a lot on her plate. I worked full time. I did a demolition and rebuild of my home. I had 2 children under the age of 5, all at the same time, plus managing my own wellness and the wellness of my family. And I didn't take a lot of time to celebrate my achievements, right? I had a big to-do list that was on the fridge, and I felt like I had this whip in my hand that, there was some type of rush in life to get things done. So as soon as we accomplished one of our goals, we were on to the other. And then we bought a rental property, and it was a duplex that needed some work. And in hindsight, what I realized was I was running on this default story, and it was based on fear. And it was based on fear of my
Mhm.
financial future. Okay. And so I've done a lot of my own work with regards to recognizing my own beliefs and my own money story and unpacking it because I wasn't really getting a lot of joy in life unless it was in the form of a boxed wine. That's where I got my reprieve. And I think, oh God, there's a spider, sorry. I think
And we're
I
doing
got,
this in real time, folks. These things happen.
I think that, I didn't really take a lot of time to celebrate my achievements and take time to experience joy in life at that time. Looking back, I was rushing, and I was rushing because I was afraid. I was afraid of not being where I wanted to be. I was afraid of being poor when I got older. And looking back, I can recognize now that a lot of that was messaging from society and from the fact that my parents at quite a young age had to sell their home in order to be financially well. And that's not something that I wanted to do, like, you know 7 years ago or whenever that was happening,
Mhm.
right? Or 12 years ago. And so I was working really, really hard to make sure that that didn't happen to me. And so to wrap this big long story up, becoming aware that the stories we have, we may not be aware of them, right? That we may be operating them on a subconscious level, like a default setting. And I think that the way that people can recognize that is by asking themselves, do I feel joyful and do I live from a peaceful place day to day? That's the question that can tell you whether or not you are operating in that default setting.
Hmm. What are some warning signs? That these default settings, our beliefs, our patterns, our stories. What are some warning signs that start to show up in our conversations and the angst and the fear that we feel? What starts to show up?
I think what starts to show up mostly is coping, right? So if you're not operating from a place of joy and peace in your day-to-day life, then generally we're operating from a place of coping. And some of those coping skills may look like exhaustion, right? Like exhaustion is basically the body shutting down to cope with the stress that you're putting it under, right? So you may feel exhausted a lot, right? Drinking was definitely a sign for me. And I see that in my own circles and on social media, you know, women, especially because, you know, I connect with a lot of women in my world, needing that drink at the end of the day, right? Just to escape life, right? And that I find is more of a socially acceptable thing to do. But from experience, looking back, I drink very, very little compared to what I did when I lived that lifestyle, you know, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I saw it then as fun and being social. It's just what we did. Whereas in hindsight, I can really see that I was coping and escaping. And I didn't get drunk every night. Like, that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But having to have a drink is definitely a sign, right? And also, I think detaching from life, you know, on a screen, whether that be shopping online, Facebook, sports, always being in front of a screen is also a form of coping, isn't it? And
Right.
escaping,
Yeah.
because it's mindless, right? So those would, to me, be the biggest signs for sure that something's not going right? Something's not aligned for you, right?
Right. So our money beliefs, stories, patterns, our feelings and emotions about it
Mhm.
really start to sabotage our entire life. So
So much.
it bleeds into other elements. You mentioned drinking is one. Escaping online. Some people surf online for hours at a time. And they're not engaged. Maybe they're distant in a relationship, or you know, whatever. So how do we you know, sort of stop that money conversation from sabotaging other areas of our life that's going to just, you know, bring us right down? You know, how do we stop those, you know, that sabotaging behavior from, you know, really tearing us apart?
Well, I think the first step is that awareness piece, right? Is somehow, some way, people become faced with a situation or an experience that really opens their eyes, and it might have to scare them, right? It might have to scare them because, again, when you're numbing out with all of these ways, not much has the opportunity to get through, right? So usually something negative has to happen. If people are curious and they're aware, and so they're looking for solutions a little bit at a time, but kind of just under the radar, then that's ideally, you know, becoming aware that money, problems, stress, worry, fear, all of that does impact every aspect of our lives. So it is important to start looking for a solution and to trust that there is one, right? Because you're not going to find it at a bank. You're not going to find it at the everyday corporate financial solutions, because it's not a cost-efficient service and it's custom for every client. So it's very difficult for that system, the corporations, to make money from people in helping them solve those problems. They actually make a lot of money from people having those problems, right?
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, they'll charge a higher interest in future.
David, I just had an emergency client getting an easy financial loan at a crisis situation, 49% interest.
Crazy.
Really difficult. And
so
you know,
how do you coach them? Like, how do you coach them around that?
Well, we did an emergency session, right? And we were able to find a solution, thankfully. And sometimes the solutions aren't pretty, but they're necessary. And the reason that she was able to come to me was because it had been 6 months since she signed the loan. And she had only paid $300 off towards the principal. And yet her payments were almost $300 bi-weekly. And she had been paying for 6 months. And
Right.
that's because of the high interest rate, but also the fees. There's fees attached to every payment. So again, often we make these decisions in a crisis and we just want that quick fix, right? But unfortunately, it's not a solution. It's not a long-term solution. So I really encourage people to ask on Facebook, ask in Facebook groups, ask friends and family, and to not fall prey to those types of solutions that are not solutions. They're actually kind of like the worst case scenario, because unfortunately, it goes into a whole nother realm of coping once you get into that type of situation, like a payday loan or any of these high interest, the signs on the post that says we'll help you out of your crisis. Probably not the best choice, right?
And you're seeing, I see a lot of it on TV, advertising on TV. I'll buy your jewelry, or we'll give you cash for something, or the payday loans. They're advertising a ton.
Totally.
The thing I really don't like are where they're going after older people. The reverse mortgage. It's like, come on, what's up with that? So that's what we're going to do, I think, on these calls, is just be a place for people to come to once a month and just sort of connect about maybe, having a good money strategy and some money sense. So that's the goal for these calls, for those tuning in now. And we're just giving you a little bit of a teaser today. So you talked about your money issue or challenge a number of years ago. How did you begin to sort of transform your stories, your patterns, your beliefs, and work your way out of that money challenge that you face?
Okay, so, I didn't really face a money challenge per se. It was more of a mindset challenge. Okay, so there is it's very different. But first of all, I recognized it. And what happened was I lost my job unexpectedly in 2013. And so that crisis, remember I said that usually people get help when there's some sort of crisis? That crisis opened up my life with time. And so now I actually had some time to really reflect on where I was, where I wanted to go, and how I was going to get there. And so that was really the beginning of my beautiful journey to where I live now. And live, I mean exist as a person, from a place of joy and peace, right? Because that became my focus. So in the past, my focus was on fear. It was on financial security for my future. And that fear robbed me of my joy in the present. And so getting that amount of time to be able to explore, what I did was I changed my focus. So becoming aware of my fear and becoming aware that I wasn't really feeling happy in my day-to-day, I was like, wow, I have an opportunity here to create my life the way I want it to be. Not the way society or my parents told me it had to be. I can live it the way that I want to be, and I want to be happy. Don't we all, David, just want to be happy?
Sure. Happy,
right?
stress-free.
Yeah, and so that became my focus. And it was magical. It was really magical to see who came into my life as my focus changed, what opportunities came into my life as my focus changed. And through that journey, I started to get asked to do presentations on mindset. And, in the past, I used to think mindset was a bit fluff, And so I was able to really look at that closely and say, you know what, I'm gonna really explore this because it is popular, right? And it blew my mind, right? It blew my mind what I started to uncover. And with my money skills, I started to develop presentations to do for networking groups that shifted my own money mindset.
Hmm.
And unpack, one of my signature online programs is Unpack Your Money Baggage. And that course, that program, it's an hour-long workshop. I blew my own mind and uncovered things about myself. And that's when I was like, whoa, this stuff in tandem with the practical dollars and cents piece, wow. So that's when I really started to embrace and explore and just elevate my own self personally.
What did you uncover about yourself? Or discover?
I discovered that I had a lot of money baggage. So I didn't have money stress with practical numbers. That's always been my gift, right? But I had money baggage that I wasn't aware of. And my favorite line for myself was, it's good enough. So I actually, instead of, honoring myself and celebrating myself and my achievements and my accomplishments, I would never do that. And instead, all of my energy and I guess energy mostly would be for my kids or my husband or my household. I deprived myself. And so when it came to myself, I would always say, well, what's good enough? Yeah, it's old, but I love it and it still works. So it's good enough. But I did that with so many things. And I was able to connect that messaging back to my parents who grew up in the war and who was raised that it was good enough, and they were just thankful for the meal that they had on their table, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of upbringing really did instill a lot of fear in me and a lot of lack mentality, in that I didn't have the right to splurge or treat myself. I didn't have the right, because I should be grateful that I have clothes on my back and a roof over my head.
And we are.
And we are. But it has to be in balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're grateful for those basic necessities only, then you never allow yourself to go beyond that. And that's what I was able to break through with my mindset, right? So now I celebrate myself more. I experience a lot of abundance in my life now. Oddly enough, now as a single mother, when I probably have less money than I ever have before. Isn't that bizarre?
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful, though.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. So I was doing a meditation before we started our call today. And, it talks about giving up your goals and your what you want, your desires, to a higher power. Just give it to the universe and trust the universe, or trust God, or whoever it is to provide for you. And sometimes it's like, I've been waiting for 20 years. You know what I'm saying? So where do these sort of spiritual practitioners who say, well, if you ask in the right way, or you practice like The Secret, or trusting, or giving it off to a higher power to take care of, how does that play out and actually show up in our lives too? And is that a wise thing to do? Do we just relinquish control, or do we need to have a little bit of control and then just live as if? What's your take on all that? Well, I think there's a lot there that I asked, but
yeah, and I think I can address it for you, okay? And I think that one of the key points that you've mentioned, and I want to just start there, is I've been waiting 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
is what you said. And so remember what I said is, how did I get through my mindset stuff? It was, I changed my focus. So for as long as you keep telling yourself and keep reflecting of what you don't have yet, you cannot be aligned with the abundance in your life that you have, or be open to more abundance.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are still telling that 20-year story, having an expectation and being let down, or not having what you want and not getting what you want. And that really speaks volumes. And I can see it in my clients' words as well. And you know, yeah, I do annoy my clients sometimes, because when you're calling people on stuff, it doesn't feel nice. But the reality is that when we speak words, that's a very powerful thing to do. And when you speak it, that speaks to what's going on in here.
I was going to ask you about that. Changing our vocabulary,
right? And so what comes out is just one little bit of what goes on in here.
So how do you feel about affirmations and changing that vocabulary?
Definitely. There's a number of different strategies that I use with my clients. I do mindset counseling, usually in a 4-pack.
Yeah.
So we'll deal with one specific thing over 4 weeks, so that there is accountability, and so there is someone to remind you and pick out those words and do those corrections, so that you can do it on your own, right? And the spiritual piece is alignment. Okay.
So what does that look like?
So alignment is basically lining up your thoughts, your words, and your actions day to day with what it is you want. So let's say you want abundance. Because abundance is a word that encompasses everything. It encompasses money, love, connection, peace. Abundance can really encompass anything that you want it to.
Sure, joy, right? A nice walk.
Exactly. It can encompass everything that you want it to. So if we want to align with abundance, we need to be able to identify what's our thoughts that are going against abundance and write them down. What's our words that do not align with abundance and write them down. And what are our actions day to day that do not align with abundance and write them down. And then what we do is then we look at those, what we've written down, and we create a new thought and a new affirmation or words or a new action, so that we have a reference guide. Because trust me, this isn't easy. Okay, it takes practice, right? But to align with abundance, we need to recognize what we're thinking, saying, or doing that does not align with abundance. And we need to have that plan in place of when we do say it, like, oh, I'm so sick of being broke. Just say that was the sentence. You're going to recognize when you say it, and then you're going to go, okay, there, I said it. What do I need to replace that with? I am grateful for the abundance in my life today. And so we're going to offset that phrase or that sentence that's so ingrained in us, and that we've probably said it all our life from our parents, potentially, right? And we're going to start correcting ourselves, right? And we're going to do that with our words, with our thoughts, with our actions. But we have to have that plan in place first, right? And so, you know, to me, that's basically how I work with my clients. And that accountability piece, that repetition piece, and also having compassion for people, right? Because it doesn't happen just like this. And in the world of instant gratification, we expect things to happen like this, don't we? Right? So
yeah, we do. You know, how do we rise above those fearful messages in the media about our economy? So this morning, for example, I do my exercise bike and I watch breakfast TV, and at 6:36 on comes my couple from CFDR to talk about the economy. And so and then also online today I read that our economy is weakening in the final half of the year, and interest rates will either stay the same or drop. So how do we, how do we position ourselves and not let that fear, oh well, you see the economy sucks, I'll never get out of this now. How do we rise above that kind of a mindset or thinking, and come out on top?
Are you ready for my answer, David?
Yeah, I am.
Unplug. Get out of it. Stop watching it. I've not watched TV, I bet you, in 10 years. I do not listen to the news. The only news I get is Facebook, and even then, I might read a headline just because I'm scrolling, but for the most part, I've canceled all my magazines. I've canceled all my newspapers. I used to get it all. Okay? And what I recognized was, hey, if I want to feel differently, I have to do differently. And we've been brainwashed to think that we need all of these things in our lives. But if they don't make you feel good, then why don't you tell me what you need it for? Right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't benefit you, then why are you consuming it? You know, because really, when my mortgage comes up, I call my mortgage broker 6 months ahead, and then we deal with what I have to deal with. I don't need to know for the next 5 years, if I have a fixed mortgage, what the interest rates are doing. It's not necessary. And again, we need to understand is all of these places where we get our information have an agenda. And that agenda, David, is not for you to be joyful or not for you to live with peace of mind.
Or those watching, right?
That's right. That's what I mean. Like, that is not their agenda. So we need to really start to question us. Why are we consuming it then? And I understand, like, I have a neighbor who thinks I'm out of my mind. He thinks I'm a little crazy, and I may be, but that's okay.
But a good crazy.
I'm peaceful and happy.
Okay.
And so if people want to label me as something else because I'm not up to date with, you know, the tragedies of the world and don't watch the news, you know, the odd time I run into him in the yard and he'll tell me about the storm that's coming, and I thank him and I put my umbrella down. Right? Because I don't know the weather either. That's always a surprise as well. But that's what I choose. And I feel like it's key, because I used to do all of those things too, David. But again, I did not live the life I live today. So.
Wow. So this is what those watching today can expect every month. We'll have a discussion on money and some strategy and collapse our stories, maybe get a little coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. So much fun, right? Like it can be. And even though money can be a hard topic for some, that's also a money story, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So having the courage to break through that first time, that's the biggest step. That's the biggest piece, is that first time. And when you survive it, you just might have the courage to do it again and again and again, and face your fears so that you can leave them all friggin' behind.
Okay, so we talked before we started recording this, and we talked about systems collapsing and so on and so forth. Well, that's a bit of a fear for some of us, that, totally. Oh, okay, well, what if the banking system does collapse? And I've been hearing this for years, by the way, and nothing's happened. I remember the 2008 recession, and I think, you know, we met shortly thereafter. I was working at Essential Communications with the Self-Employment Benefit Program, and at that time, And I remember at night I'd listen to Coast AM, George Noory, and he had all kinds of conspiracy theorists on about, oh, the economy is going to just tank, and by February we'll see, the worst depression ever in our humanity, right? And this was like this well-known sort of futurist, and you know what I decided? I said, I got to turn this. I'm going to say it. I got to turn this shit off. I'm not listening to this anymore because it's not helping, right? And here we are. So that was 2008. Here we are 11 years later, and we're still kind of cooking along. There's still trillions of dollars being exchanged today. People are going to the store and buying stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And you make a good point, but you got to recognize that it's just drama. It's drama. It's like a reality show on TV. You can't control it. Don't get me wrong, David. I use a bank. I use a number of banks, actually. And the reality is that I'm still a part of systems that are there. My kids still go to public school, even though that's, collapsing by the moment. But the reality is that I'm not going to live my life day to day in fear of what may happen, because that doesn't serve me and it doesn't serve anyone. And so I think that getting to the being more present in our day-to-day life, because let's face it, I could get hit by a car tomorrow, right? Knock on wood, or my computer, right? And so why not live my life today? And I don't mean and just spend and not care. I don't mean to that extreme, but I just
there's a cause and effect, like you
totally
going to pay a price, right?
Totally. But all of what you're talking about is that fear. And so there's that challenge for people is they want to be aware and they want to know what other people are talking about. And I think honestly that's part of the issue, is that people don't know what to talk about. So if they're not up on current events, how will they ever have a conversation? Well, what's the other choice? Gossip. You can talk about other people, but if you do it the way that I have swung, is start talking about your dreams. Start talking about what you love. Start talking about good experiences and what you appreciate in life, and the amazing people that or experiences that you've had, right? It doesn't have to be about fear or negative or that type of thing. But again, we've been really convinced that if we're not aware, we're out of the loop, we're judged, right?
Yeah.
And that comes from self-love and your sense of your own self, that if somebody judges you, you're not going to fall apart, right? That it's okay. It's okay if they judge me, because that really does say something about that person,
right,
more than it says about ourselves, right?
Right. And people have their own beliefs and stories and patterns around money or life or whatever, and
they certainly
that's
do.
their experience that they're kind of putting on to you, and it's like it doesn't and it shouldn't reflect who we are as humans.
Exactly.
Yeah. Just one last question.
Sure.
Lots of sayings and myths about money: the root of all evil, the rich get richer. These are also drilled into us really deeply. Just some tips to manage that mental chatter and talk. To me, sometimes it's a war that we face daily. What's your take, and maybe a couple of takeaways that those watching can
Sure
apply?
Sure. First of all, we got really quiet, so I'm not sure if you hit a button, but I can, it's very, very quiet all of a sudden.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit better. Yeah.
Okay, so what I was saying is there's a lot of myths and around money, like money's the root of all evil, the rich get richer.
That's better.
That mental chatter. How do we manage that mental chatter? Because to me, it's like a war that we face it daily. So what's your take, and what are a couple of tips and takeaways?
Sure. So I think my first tip is to become aware of it. That seriously, without a doubt, we cannot move into solutions until we have awareness. And I don't mean recognizing that you do it. I mean full awareness. And so I would really encourage the viewers to start to become more aware of how many times in a day they have a negative thought about money, or about anything, because it all weaves together, right? Become aware of how often you're having negative thoughts. Carry a piece of paper in your pocket. Put a, you know how we used to do this?
I'm looking.
Like that?
Oh yeah. The little numbers.
Right?
Yeah, on the stick.
Do that.
Yeah.
Just so that you can start to really realize how much this may be an issue for you. Because again, David, we can say, yeah, sometimes it's a war, but if we were to realize that we had 50 thoughts a day that were negative, then don't you think that would get somebody one step closer to maybe hiring someone to support them as a counselor or a coach or whatever, right? When they started to really realize the actual numbers, because measurement matters in order for you to get out of the whole generalization of, we all have negative thoughts. We all have bad days, right, David? We all have it. And so we kind of just skim over the surface. But when we really start to become aware of the numbers, and what would happen if you did this for yourself and you noticed you had 50 thoughts a day that were negative? Would it impact you differently than if you said, yeah, I have bad days, right?
Yeah.
It becomes more tangible, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that's what I would definitely recommend, first of all, is to become more aware. And you can do this with your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Because let me tell you, your words and your thoughts your words and your actions come from your thoughts. So whatever you measure, you're going to understand that they all kind of are together, right? They're all work as a team, right? The next step would be to recognize what they want to do about it, right? So if we recognize, holy crap, I do have a lot of negative thoughts in one day, then I think the next step for viewers would be to really just sit down and just in quiet and just reflect and maybe reflect on how you would like to feel instead. Okay? Because fear, everything in this world, I believe, comes from one of two places. Either a place of fear or a place of love and trust.
Right.
And when we make decisions from a place of fear as opposed to love and trust, it usually is not the best decision for us.
No.
Okay? Almost 99% of the time. It may feel like it at the moment, but in the long term, it's not. And so having that awareness, doing it today, doing it next week, really that awareness in itself is almost like, for me, like in the work that I do, opening a door of opportunity for you to start to look at the world and your life differently. And that's where the magic happens.
Right. And I agree. I think we need to sort of create our own reality. And we're all, we're all in the matrix, the system, which, it doesn't have our best interests in heart all the time. And we need to get out of that matrix and think differently, believe differently, act differently. Yeah.
Choose differently, right? Choose differently. And, we can only see the options in front of us that align with how we're thinking, how we're speaking, and what we're doing.
Yeah.
Those options will not change for us until we start to change those other things, right? Because what you don't see is because of where you are at, right?
Yeah.
And that's just how it works. Somebody who has $100,000 in the bank and is living their life from a place of fear, peace and joy, is going to see a lot different opportunities than that client who was into the hawk, I call it, with Easy Financial. Even though this client's intelligent and has a really good paying job, right? It doesn't say that person is not those things, but the options that they saw were very different,
Right.
right?
And, you know, even if you have money, you know, you can still be hoarding and holding on to it out of fear too, right?
Often, like, I do work with clients who are that way, and they're just feeling like they're not living to the extent that they'd like to live. And often it is a combination of the practical with unpacking that money baggage and that mindset. And like I said, my clients often are just, you know, after they work with me, they propel into the life that they want to live because of just that little bit of work that they've done to realize why they've kind of been treading water for the last 20
Right.
years,
Right.
right? Mm-hmm.
This is great. This is a great start. So those who are watching now and want to maybe improve your situation or get some coaching once a month, we're going to do these calls once a month and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just talk, you know, strategy, realign your thoughts, your thinking, your beliefs, and actions around money, so you'll have a little more cha-ching in the pocket, right?
Mm-hmm. For
Um,
sure.
Janet, I want to thank you for this. I'm going to end the recording here, but let's talk a little bit offline. And thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, David. Thank you for the invite. It's been lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's Janet Reese, and she's with the Money Counselor. And I had the pleasure of teaching you and coaching you in the self-employment benefit program in Whitby. So that was wonderful.
It was.
How
It
we came
was.
to be. Thank you for this today. And thank you
Thank you.
for watching for those of you. And we'll look forward to seeing you each month.